Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So with module 25 we have the new trial Examiner's Reliquary and we can obtain 10 new mythic rings from here. However, you will have to complete the master version and get lucky in your end chest. These new rings have the highest item level in the game along with some decent bonuses. We're going to go through all 10 of them. Check if they actually work. Is this ring going to actually give you damage against beholders? Is this ring actually going to give you damage resistance? As there are still rings from the past that still do not work. Damage resistance against dragons. So we got to testing. Right here I have my test data document. We start things off with the Lothian abrasion ring. 10% damage against beholders. Pretty much best in slot for a smoother run within the new trial. Where damage matters, you will be fighting a beholder and want to be doing as much damage as possible against those beholders. So with my test, it works. Again, this was against the mini boss, the Acolyte of Examined, within the module 25 zone. You can see the damage difference there, and we have a look at the math, and it equates to a total 10% damage buff, as the ring states. Next up, we have the Lothian Pain Ring with Beholder Ward. This one ideal for tanks who need that extra survivability. I guess you could also run it on a DPS for survivability if you can make it fit without sacrificing too much damage. And very fortunately, it does work. You see the effectiveness of the enemy hits get reduced from your 65 to your 58, equating to a 10% damage resistance. The next ring is pretty cool. However, if you just read the tooltip, it doesn't seem very reliable. You're not going to have 100% uptime. However, it's a bit broken, a bit bugged, but in a good way. Basically, the duration is actually 15 seconds. You can see when you dodge, you see the tooltip up here, Spider Stride, and it lasts us 15 seconds. Now, it says you can only refresh it every 15 seconds, but you can actually refresh it every 10 seconds. You can see we can dodge again and the duration is refreshed. So when it has like 5 seconds remaining on its time remaining, you can go and dodge and completely refresh the duration back to 15 seconds. This means you can have 100% uptime on the bonus ring. Also, it'll double the values from 3% to 6% whenever you're in Underdark, which is Menzoberranzan, Demogorgon, Master Temple of the Spider, and also Examined's Reliquary. So, pretty neat ring, giving you 6% damage bonus in relevant content, and fortunately, it works. It's also broken again, where basically it's a bit flipped in the tooltip. So instead of having a 10-second duration, it has a 15-second duration, and instead of only being able to occur every 15 seconds, it can occur every 10 seconds. It won't stack multiple times, but it'll just allow you to refresh that buff. Again, that's all the math there. You can see again, the first part is our base damage, the second part is the 3% increase, and the third part is the 6% increase when in Underdark. The next ring is Lothian Arrogance. This one just purely gives us a boost in stats, and we can see it works just by having again a look and comparing our stats there. Combat advantage increasing, and then our incoming healing increasing when our stamina drops below that 25%. So if you do go and like use your stamina once, like a dodge, at least on a wizard, you can see it goes down, but it'll very quickly go back up again when we get above that 75%. The next ring is Lothian Rage. This one again just boosts our stats, but when against just one enemy. I don't rate these rings too highly, as if you're running most of the boss fights, like your Master Temple of the Spider, like all those bosses have ads, like your Cocoon, you end up with 2 targets then. Your first boss with all those spiders and clones, and the second boss with all the demons, you're not really having the stats when it matters. And in Examined as well, you have a phase, 2 phases, where you have to beat up these clones. You have 4 of them. Again, you won't have those stats when it matters. There's many boss fights, you can't really make this work, but the bonus will give you the stats, and it does work in that regard. And in total, it is, yeah, your 5% crit severity and 2.5% combat advantage. There are just better options that give you the same amount of stats. The next one is Lothian Avernus. This is a pretty neat healer ring, although it does rely on you having 85% or more hit points. It'll give you a bunch of outgoing healing rating, plus 7.5% crit severity. And yeah, you see it does work just there with the champion's ferocity. Then you have Lothian's Anger. Whenever you kill an enemy, you gain the Forte increase. I don't see this as all too relevant, but it works. You can go kill your enemy and you'll see your Forte go up. Then you have Lothian Vengeance. Whenever you use an artifact, you gain 2% recharge speed. You can gain a maximum 20%. This gets all reset when you die or leave combat. I don't see it as all too useful again. Perhaps as a tank, but you are having 14 minutes maximum in this trial and you need to not die. How many artifact calls? Maybe 2 in phase 1, 2 in phase 2, another one in phase 3, another one in phase 4, another 2 in phase 5, another one in phase 6, and maybe another one in phase 7. That's 11 artifact calls. Yes, by the end of the trial, you gain 20% recharge speed. Yeah, I don't see it as all too feasible and not really worth using, but it will work. It'll give you those 10 stacks of Artifact Fanatic. And then you have Lothian Spite. Whenever you have shield or temporary hit points, you gain an increase to your incoming healing. This works. Whenever you have that shield, you gain the 7%. Pretty neat, viable to use on a tank, and again, you'll see the stat increase there. And lastly, we have Lothian Dominance. Your single target heals are 8% more effective. Now this works, but it's not as good as per the tooltip says. That 8% unfortunately stacks with your outgoing healing, mathematically that is. It's not going to prevent your outgoing healing rating or stat going to 90%, but it can provide that bonus above 90%. It's like the other outgoing healing bonuses, those other total healing bonus, like the weapons. The 2% from here effectively mathematically adds to the outgoing healing. It's not a separate stat, and then multiplies by everything else. You'll see all that here, the math. That's the exact formula right there. So it works, kinda. Not as great as you might hope, like a pure 8%. It ends up at only like a 1.4% increase when you already have like 80%, 83% outgoing healing. We have 83% here because you gain 81% from the stat and 2% from the weapon bonus. So effectively we have that much. And it works on our single target heals like our Cure Wounds and doesn't work on like our Divine Shelter. There is some bugs with some powers, like the initial hit of Healing Word might be considered single target. There'll be some other powers like that as well, but then the heal over time is not considered single target, so it won't gain the boost for that. You might want to check yourself on your healer, but for Paladin, Divine Shelter is not considered a single target heal. Your Divine Touch isn't a single target, but your Hand of Divinity would be considered single target, is considered single target, so you can gain the healing boost for that and provide your tank with even a bit more shield. I just don't see it as very necessary to run this ring. You're better off running something which is just going to increase all of your heals. I guess you could use it instead of like a buff ring, instead of maybe the grace ring if you were going to use that anyway. And let's say then another person in your party is using it, they don't stack, so there's no point you to run it, so you would run that then instead. But that's all of the rings. Last thing to test though is the set bonus you gain with the rings. If you're like a damage dealer, it could be viable. You could run with your Lothian Abrasion for the Beholder damage, and then your Lothian Repulsion for, again, another damage bonus, or just the other stat ring, Lothian Arrogance, if you can make use of the combat advantage there. You can see when you have the set, you deal an additional 2% damage against bosses, and your attacks have a 10% chance to deal 100 extra magnitude damage. That 100 extra magnitude damage is nothing. Again, it's like Mythilar set. It's not going to scale with your stats, unfortunately, and you end up with only dealing like your base damage mitigated by the enemy's defense and deflects so that it ends up very little bonus. But the 2% will help a little bit, just overall damage. And so from testing both the rings together with Lothian Might, we can see the bonus of 2% additional damage against bosses does indeed work. And you can see what I was saying with the Lothian Might, the damage not being scaled with your stats. It purely gives damage based off your base damage. So that being what it says here, our damage. So you can see when we actually tested it, we had 10,451, which is exactly the base damage we're getting here, mitigated by the enemy's defense, and then if they dodge, mitigated even further. So it's a very inconsequential damage bonus. So one last thing, my recommendations on what rings you should use. If you're a damage dealer and running the new trial, you of course want to be running the Lothian Abrasion Ring for the damage against beholders. It's not going to provide the boost to the entirety of the trial like phase 1 and phase 3, but for the rest, where damage matters, you will be fighting a beholder. Then for your second ring, you could very well run Lothian Repulsion, giving you the extra damage bonus. And that's probably the best combination right there. It'll also be the easiest to fit. My build's a mess right now, so don't look at the stats. They are both damage bonus rings, and one provides accuracy and one provides crit strike, so shouldn't be the hardest to fit in. You could alternatively run with Lothian Arrogance if you're stingy on your stamina usage and make sure to control that. However, you will end up with far more crit strike than you can really make use of. You'll have to do a lot of build adjusting because both rings will dump a ton of crit strike on you. Then if you are a healer, I would recommend, instead of per se the glowing restoration ring, you run Lothian Aberrance. Just giving that crit severity will help, especially if you're a paladin healer, and it's usually not such a big deal about the HP requirement on a paladin healer because you're providing overshields, and you'll usually provide those when everybody's on full HP pretty much anyway. And if they're not, you're generally double casting, and when you double cast, the first one will usually always proc the critical touch for then your second cast to make sure everybody has a critical shield. So most of the time you are double casting anyway. Of course, it's up to you. And as a tank, I recommend running Lothian Pain, of course, if you're running the new trial. If you're not running the new trial, you can switch that out to Lothian Spite. They both give a ton of defense, and thus I wouldn't use both of them together, or you'll end up with far more defense than you'll know what to do with. And then my second ring I would run with Illustra's Tenacity, especially in the new trial, as the Eyes of the Beholder, which is going to hit you the hardest and the most often. And fortunately, this damage reduction does work. I was asked to test it, and we have that right here. With Tenacity against the Beholder's Bite, you can see it's not working, but against the Eyes, it is working, as our effectiveness gets reduced. The effectiveness of the enemy's hits. And without Tenacity, you can see the effectiveness remains the same across the Bite and the Eyes of the Beholder. The Bite being melee, the Eyes being ranged, and thus giving you the 3% damage reduction against the ranged attacks. So very useful in the new trial. So that should be that. All 10 rings tested, including the set bonus. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. Massive thank you again to all these channel members for their continued support, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.